Welcome to Assembly Calendar. I'm Mike Friesen. With us for our program today, Assemblyman Bob Oaks. Bob Oaks represents Cayuga, Wayne, Oswego counties, and we want to thank you folks all throughout the region for joining us. That's the 130th Assembly District. Assemblyman Oaks, nice to see you.
Nice to see you, Mike.
Well, we got a lot of catching up to do here. We are in the home stretch of this 2016 legislative session already. Just a few weeks to go, really, before the session wraps up. And I don't know that a lot of people are going to say this has been the most active, a lot of things accomplished legislative session, but that can always change in the last few weeks, can't it?
It can. There are numerous bills, a lot of them with local significance, meaning maybe what we call local bills just affecting a community, a county, a region, as it might be, as opposed to a statewide bill, but also outstanding issues. And certainly in the mix today and at the top of a lot of people's headlines over the past few days and whatever, the issue of ethics, the issue of the behavior of elected or high government officials and what they've done to break existing laws or to violate really the public trust in the way that they've acted.
The reason that is front and center for people here at the Capitol this week as we tape this program is just hours ago, a judge down in New York City passed sentence down on the former Speaker of the Assembly, Sheldon Silver, who was charged and convicted last year of corruption, of using his public office for his own personal gain to the tune of millions of dollars. And former Speaker Silver received a sentence of 12 years in federal prison, forfeiture of $5.2 million, and a $1.75 million fine on top of that. Is that to send a message to the rest of the legislature, your colleagues in the legislature, that this is serious business here?
That's a message, I believe, strongly. And at the same time, Mike, he's not the only person that's had ethical challenges and violated the public trust. And so we sit here, I think a message came from the federal court and the judge in sentencing. Hopefully it does change things. Of course, I had hoped that the budget process was going to change from last year after we saw the arrest and conviction of both of the legislative leaders in the Senate and the Assembly. And yet we ended up with a closed process as it has been before. It really didn't change things. Now we see, though, only this week as well, we see the executive branch being investigated as well for perhaps some of the individuals benefiting personally in dollars, as well as directing contracts to certain individuals. And so I hope we're at a point where finally the executive and the legislative bodies, both the Assembly and Senate, are willing to take up things that we've been pushing. Among them, first of all, you went through and said how Speaker Silver, or former Speaker Silver, was being impacted. Those were pretty significant. And yet, even though he did a number of those things, convicted, benefited highly by that, he's still able to collect a nearly $80,000 a year pension. We can't do anything about that with the way that the existing law is. That needs to be taken care of. Second thing, we've had a proposal for some time. I was in the Assembly throughout the time that Speaker Silver has been the leader. And throughout that time, I don't think he started out manipulating the system to benefit himself or those around him necessarily. But as he was in longer and amassed more power, things became simple to him. He was in control of so much. He figured out the system, those around him did, and he started in, over a period of years, doing things to benefit himself.
His defense at trial was, that's just how we do things. That was his defense. That's the political way things get done in Albany. And I think a lot of people just shook their head when they heard that and said, "Oh, he's going to be in trouble now," because he really seemed to believe that,
Yes.
as that's he didn't do anything wrong because that's just the way things are done.
So if we had term limits on the legislative leaders, at least, so individuals can't be in positions of power for so long that they're the people that everybody has to go through to get anything done in Albany as a part of the legislative process. So those two things need to happen. Also, we've had a ethics panel called JCOPE, which has been really toothless. It hasn't, I don't think, effectively done its work, and it's all political appointees that are on it. We need to change that structure and then take a look at the existing laws and strengthen those so that within state law we can look at individuals who might go outside the bounds of what is proper behavior and impact them in a similar way that the federal government has through the convictions that we've just seen.
I'm going to say there's a lot of people watching this program right now that are nodding their head in agreement to everything you're saying, particularly the thing about public officials who abuse their position forfeiting their public pension. But none of it's happened. I mean, how pathetic is it that this legislature that has seen an assembly speaker arrested and convicted and sentenced, and a Senate leader, and all these other senators and assemblymen that are sitting in prison right now, this legislature can't bring itself to do any of these things that you're talking about. It's been more than a year since the arrests of the leaders from last year. Nothing's happened yet.
And exactly, and you started out the question to me saying, what's going to happen before the end of the year? I went to ethics first. What I'm saying is, this is the time, if there ever is the time, this is the time between now and the end of the legislative session to make that happen this year. And it's going to take some will, but you can bet that those of us in the Assembly Republican Conference in the minority are going to be pushing hard to say, we can't just give lip service to this as we did before. We have to make this happen this year.
As I mentioned, the speaker's frame of mind about not feeling like he hadn't done anything wrong, that was just how business is transacted at the state capitol. There was an article in the New York Times this past weekend interviewing a lot of the various former state legislators who are in prison right now, Senators Espada and Huntley, Assemblyman Boyland, and so forth. And there was one common thread that ran through that entire thing. They all said, we didn't do anything wrong. They didn't feel like they had done anything wrong. That's got to be part of what you're up against with these things, is that it's just this perception on the part of such a percentage of the legislature that this is just how we do things here. I
guess the ethics training that's been done hasn't exactly gotten through to a lot of the people perhaps who've taken that.
And I smile when he says that, because everybody who is connected to the legislature, whether a member like Assemblyman Oaks or even the staff, all have to go through regular training, repeat training year after year after year as to what's ethical and what's not, what kind of gifts you can accept, can't accept. But it doesn't seem to have sunk in. So back to that original question about what's left to do in this 2016 legislative session. Are there other things on your wish list you'd like to see get done?
Clearly, we finished this year's budget process. As a part of that, the governor rammed down a family leave bill that's going to take effect, that's going to end up having some significant costs going on and impact on business. Put through a minimum wage that will have immediate impact by the end of this year and over the coming years, that's going to make our small businesses and some fledgling businesses and low margin businesses struggle to stay in operation as they compete to operate. And so with that, the governor said, well, let's form a panel and fix business to make us a stronger state with business. Well, supposedly they're supposed to report in 3 weeks. Who knows what's going to come out of that? But when you talk about the things that just happened as a part of this budget to impact business in a negative way, I think we have to not just do a few things around the edges. There have to be some significant, strong efforts and decisions made and agreements made to lessen the burden on the regulatory side, perhaps still looking at some other tax structure issues for our businesses. Otherwise, it's going to be extremely difficult for New York State and especially upstate New York, the areas I represent, to be competitive, to keep the jobs that we have, let alone try to grow the jobs to strengthen our economy to move forward as a state. So that's number one. And certainly I went through a forum recently listening to candidates who were thinking about running for our local regional state Senate seat, and talked about mandates. We all talk about that, but when a lot of these people are in local government now and they're saying so much of our budgets are impacted by what state government does, and certainly that's where we ought to be focusing to providing that type of relief. So if we're going to get something done, the ethics side, business and regulatory relief and some mandate relief, certainly those would all be at the top of my list.
You hear that all the time from mayors and county executives and county administrators who come to Albany and say, there's so much of our budget we can't cut because they are things that are required for us to do by the state of New York. You must do this. You must do that. It's a top-down kind of situation that they can't do anything about. They're pretty frustrated by that.
Absolutely, absolutely.
The other thing we were going to mention was that some of the nice things that are going on. There's a lot of things that aren't so nice going on here in state government, but back home you were saying the canals are getting opened up. It's spring is in the air.
Spring is in the air. Actually,
baseball's being played.
Early this year, a bridge in Macedon that's been out the Canandaigua Road one for 6-7 years now is going to be finished and replaced, not in time for this season, but the work is going on, so by the end of this year. So there are challenges with the canal, but it's such a great resource, and we see people using it, especially the trails along it on a regular basis. And so that's open. Baseball season is here, so that's good news. And as we leave the taping of this, I'm going to go and greet a group of junior high students from Marion who make an annual trek down here. And so the new group of students will be coming, an opportunity to see their capital in action. And very honestly, for the people who watch this show, who might get a feel of what's happening at the Capitol, really it's a great, it is, people own this place. Right. And a trip to Albany, a tour around a little bit, come see me. It is a great opportunity to see government and to see where government takes place at the state level.
And you'll be so impressed by the Capitol building itself. Everyone should go visit their own state capitol. Albany it's a great little city, but the building itself, the Capitol building, is something that you should see. Yeah. It took me years to get my dad, who grew up in this area, to go see it one time, and by the time I finally got him to see it, he was very impressed. There's a guy who was an engineer and couldn't believe the building and what all went into its construction. Quickly, want to let you folks know, if you can't make it to Albany, you've got other ways to get a hold of your Assemblyman, Bob Oaks, and let him know what's on your mind about any of the issues that you might have heard us talking about this week or any other week. Contact him at his office in Lyons, 946-5166. Send him an email at oaksr@assembly.state.ny.us, or you can even catch up with him on Facebook at Assemblyman Oaks. Bob Oaks, thanks again for being here.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, folks, too, for spending your time. We'll hope to see you soon for our next edition of Assembly Calendar.